Good afternoon, everybody. A very, very warm welcome to you all to this wonderful celebratory event. I think in many ways the highlight of our academic year here in the Faculty of Health Sciences. My name is Paul O'Byrne. I have the privilege of being Dean and Vice President of the Faculty of Health Sciences at Mcmaster University, and delighted to see so many of you here, so many friends and colleagues here to celebrate. To begin our formalities, I would like to acknowledge that we're meeting in this space, which is the traditional territories of the Mississauga and Haudenosaunee nations, and within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. So, we're here to celebrate, and here to celebrate excellence, to induct new faculty members to our community of distinction, to celebrate Dr. Gina Browne, Dr. Malcolm Sears, and the late Dr. Delsworth Harnish. And I'm very happy to welcome Dr. Browne, Dr. Sears, and Dell's wife Liz Scheid, and their families here today to join with us in this wonderful event. For Dr. Sears, I want to say welcome to his wife Jan, his daughter Joanna Lima, her husband Brian, son Chris Sears, and his wife Caroline. And from Dr. Brown's family, her sons Dylan and Joseph. And with Liz Scheid, their daughters Chandra and, I have it here somewhere, I apologize. Yeah, right. Thank you very much. I apologize for that. I also want to welcome other relatives, friends, and former colleagues of our three inductees, both on and off Mcmaster campus. So it's a little incongruous to have an event like this celebratory event here in this space. It's the foyer of one of our main buildings in the campus, but in many ways it's the perfect place to have such an event, because this is the most widely used area of our medical center and where these wonderful people are recognized, and our students and our staff and faculty pass by here every day and get a chance to look at the accomplishments of so many of our faculty. It's vital that the names of those people who have achieved so much in building our reputation be front and center, and this location is the perfect place for that. This recognition is also important to us, and it was established to honor alumni, faculty, and staff who have brought distinction and profile to Mcmaster Faculty of Health Sciences through remarkably innovative research and scholarship. Now, we really do have quite a profile. I'm going to boast just a little bit about how well Health Sciences is doing. We are ranked in the top 50 in all 4 of the world ranking systems for health science faculties. The one I like personally most of all is the Times Higher Education ranking system, which has ranked us 23rd in the world this year and 2nd in Canada. The number 1 ranked university cannot be named at this event, although it's not too far from here. And we have also been recognized just yesterday for the 3rd year in a row as Canada's most research-intensive university. So we bring in more research dollars for the size of our faculty than any other faculty of health sciences in Canada. It's of course wonderful facilities, the excellent equipment, the labs we have, but none of that would be of any value at all without the people, the excellence and commitment of the faculty and staff and students that we have, and this is really what we're honoring this afternoon. The 3 people we're here to celebrate with today and to honor spent the majority of their careers here in Hamilton, but have had an impact not just locally in Hamilton, but also across Canada and worldwide. Professor Emerita Gina Browne has been a trailblazer in advancing evidence-informed innovation in care and service delivery for vulnerable populations. She's become renowned as a distinguished researcher, scholar, and educator while with the School of Nursing from 1971 until her retirement in 2015. Dr. Delsworth, known to everybody as Dell Harnish, was an iconoclastic, provocative, and disruptive innovator in the very best ways possible. Dell was a virologist who joined the faculty in 1984, but he made his mark with the extraordinary educational innovation, not least of which was the establishment of the highly successful Bachelor of Health Science program, which remains today the most competitive undergraduate program in all of Canada. Third inductee is my friend and colleague, Dr. Malcolm Sears. Dr. Sears made groundbreaking contributions as a clinician and researcher in asthma since he arrived at Mac about 30 years ago now. He is the founding director of the Canadian Healthy Infant Longitudinal Development Study, the CHILD study, which has had and will continue to have dramatic impact on the evaluation of children, the development of allergies and asthma, and any other chronic disease of childhood. All three of these inductees, Drs. Brown, Harnish, and Sears, have had a deep passion for advancing human knowledge to improve health, and have also had a deep passion for this institution, and it's for that we're recognizing them this afternoon. So, to begin the induction ceremony, I would like to introduce another friend and colleague, Dr. Carolyn Byrne, who will induct our first new member of the community distinction, Dr. Gina Brown. Dr. Byrne is a professor emeritus of nursing, held the role as Associate Dean, Faculty of Health Science, Nursing, and Director of the School of Nursing from 2014 to 2017. We intersected for about a year and a half during my tenure. We had a lot of fun, and it's wonderful to have Carolyn here to induct Dr. Brown. Carolyn.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm actually here replacing Dr. Sandra Carroll, who is now the Associate Dean. She's had to attend a conference in Vancouver, so she couldn't be here. And imagine my delight when about a month ago she called me and asked me if I could deliver this message. In a minute, you'll see why. So it's with great pleasure that I'm here today to congratulate Gina Brown on her award as a member of the Community of Distinction in the Faculty of Health Sciences. But before I talk about Gina, I would like to acknowledge some of the people that are in the audience today. First, her son Dylan. Dylan seems to be following in his mother's footsteps. He is a Tier 2 research chair at the University of Waterloo. I was thinking about this morning. You know, Dylan, you might want to move to Mcmaster. Joseph, his brother, can't be here today. He works in the Concordia Music Lab in Montreal and works with the Montreal Symphony. He can't be here not because of his job, but he and his wife, Emma, have just had a little baby, a first grandson for Gina. So they're in Montreal looking after the baby. Next, I would like to acknowledge our research team. I look out here and see all of the people that work together. We've been having a great reunion since 1990. That speaks to how old we are. But the only two people that I think are absent, Gina, are Amiram Gaffney and Lahana. But I know they've sent you their own personal congratulations. So Gina has many accomplishments. Not only is she a distinguished researcher and scholar, she was a dynamic and excellent educator for many hundreds of undergraduate students, for graduate students, and a postdoctoral fellows in building capacity as a supervisor for over 80 graduate students and 14 postdoc fellows. In research, dedicated much of her work to vulnerable communities, mental health, chronic disease, and disadvantaged populations, as Paul had said. Gina's research funding amounted to over $30 million from over 100 grants. She really has brought honor to nursing across this country. Gina was the director for several research units, but the one I would like to mention in particular is the Health and Social Service Utilization Research Unit, which I was on with Gina. So I want to tell this story. Where's Jackie Roberts? I know she's in the crowd. Okay. So I really clearly remember a conversation back in the 1990s after we had just submitted our grant to try and get that research unit. So we were proposing to do something that no one had done before. We were going to collaborate. No one had done complete in total before. They'd done some pieces of it. We were going to collaborate with community agencies, do randomized trials of community interventions, compare a variety of outcomes of both the parents and the children, and in addition to that, measure and compare the health and social service costs across our intervention. So I was very, very young at the time, and this was quite daunting to me as a new researcher. So I turned to Jackie as the grant was going out the door, and I said, oh my God, what if we get this grant? Jackie said, oh no, it's too big, we'll never get it. Well, we did on the first try. And we worked with community partners, community agencies, families, recreation people, Gina will probably mention some of them, for over 18 years testing community-based interventions. So before I read the citation that goes with Gina's plaque, I just want to take a second to mention Gina's personal characteristics that make her an absolute joy to work with. Besides being tremendously bright, thoughtful, compassionate, and I wrote someone who thinks outside of the box, and then after I did that, I said, actually, there's no boxes for Gina. She cares deeply about others' welfare, and she does not like the limelight herself, but shares it with others. So this is a big step, eh? Coming and getting this? Anyway, it has indeed been a privilege to have Gina first as my mentor, then as a colleague, and now a friend. I'll read you the citation. Is that what I meant to do, read the citations? Yes. Okay, yes? Gina Brown has been a trailblazer in advancing evidence-informed innovations in care and service delivery for vulnerable populations. She became renowned as a distinguished researcher, scholar, and educator while in the School of Nursing from 1971 until retirement in 2015, dedicating much of her work to marginalized communities, mental health, and chronic disease. She had a distinct talent for bringing together researchers, policymakers, community partners to develop and test integrated approaches to provide proactive, multi-sectorial care that improve the lives of countless individuals and their family. Her approach has been applied across Canada and around the world. Among her awards is an honorary degree from Ryerson University. So ladies and gentlemen, can I please have you welcome Dr. Gina Brown.
Oh my goodness, gracious sakes alive. You might be able to tell I'm not from these parts, but I've been here for almost 50 years now. Let me just say, I have only really one message and a lot of people to thank. And my one message is this, that it's impossible to have islands of excellence in a sea of indifference. that the only way you can have excellence is through collaborative partnerships between multi-levels, multi-partners, multi-everything. So I just stand in awe that so many people wanted to be helpful. But before I do that, let me just say, Carolyn, thank you for those lovely words. And my late husband, Jay Brown, who Galdi is here to honor, and my sons would be just so pleased with your remarks, as am I. And then I want to thank the School of Nursing for hiring me in 1971 as a 22-year-old. And I think I shocked everybody because people wondered if I'd have a cocktail at lunch, and I said, yes, I'll have a scotch and water. Well, I've learned that you don't do that. But we should thank also our unusual Faculty of Health Science, so different from the, not to mention U of T, because collaboration is encouraged, and they encourage departments to work together, and I've been pleased to be part of the Department of Clinical Epidemiology for a number of years. And then before I do anything, I believe Betty Chung is in the audience there, Betty, and Susan, Amy, and Tess, possibly, who we want to thank are the people who helped Dr. Byrne host such a beautiful occasion. I also want to acknowledge the genius of the Ministry of Health and their funding. For their genius was, and the only reason I applied for this particular grant is because I wouldn't have to leave clinical practice, which was, and still is, my first love. We were funded to be in partnership with community agencies. It's just that we took the risk to be in partnership with 16 rather than 1. And that's because, as a family therapist in primary care at the time for some 34 years, I noticed that people didn't just have one problem or need one service. They needed many services. And in the early 90s, how would you provide so many services with such scarce budgets and everything being cut? So the only way to provide more with everything being cut would be to pool our resources where everything and everyone was made richer, everyone was made smarter, and nothing was lost in the dispersal. So I do have to thank so many. Let me begin by the Hamilton and Halton Regional Departments of Social Service and Hamilton and Halton Family Health Teams, the Carolina Medical Group, and Stone Church, Regional Departments of Public Health, both community settings, the Social Planning Councils, District Health Councils, the St. Elizabeth and Victorian Order of Nurses, as Carolyn said, the YMCA of Hamilton and Burlington, Children's Aid Societies, and most recently the Catholic and District School Boards to help with our latest project on helping youth in Hamilton that don't have a high school education achieve that. So one thing about them is you see the genius of the funding is we were funded to make these people happy, these agencies. And if they weren't happy with us, we weren't going to continue to be funded. So we needed to do what they wanted done. And of course, I learned in the first interview not to ask them, what are your research questions? Because service persons don't think that way. They think of, well, they have problems. And I learned from social services not to use the word problem, but to use the word circumstance or challenge, but not problem. And here we came from a problem-based curriculum, but anyway, tried to hide that. They would sit around and say that their problems were that one social worker was serving 191 families on social assistance, and they were funded only to take care of 91, not 191. I said, that's it. We'll do a randomized trial at downsizing because they're trying to cut everything, but let's just cut things randomly, and then we'll maybe learn something. Anyway, so many stories to tell about all that, but who I really want to acknowledge, and you ladies will have to stand because you're not as old as all of us in the front row and don't have to prop yourself up. But let me, before I acknowledge the staff, let me thank our founding investigators, Professor Jacqueline Roberts, who always believed in me, and her colleague, Carolyn Byrne, who was usually doubtful. Of course, you've mentioned Miriam Gaffney, a world-renowned health economist that helped us interpret the costs of and calculate the costs of people using services. You see, when people are really vulnerable, they use everything, however inappropriate, that's insured. So people use lots of things. I don't know if Ellen Jameson is here, but we did a study of shared clientele, and I only knew that the Department of Public Health only had 4,600 nurse visits for a population of 103,000 people on social assistance at the time. We never would have had to do the study of shared clientele because there was no way that they would be that shared. But anyway, we learned. Then later, Robin Weir and her sister June, thank you for the flowers this morning. Everybody is so generous. And Dr. Joan Crook joined us later with Dr. Basuma Jamdar. And Hannah Tabani joined us later too when we got funding for an AIDS research unit. Of course, we had many students that became career scientists and ultimately faculty. Dr. Maureen Markle-Reed, one. And I did forget to mention that at first we were joined by Dr. Susan Watt in the first initial parts of our time together. But then, as I know all of these folks would agree, that the real glue and reason for our success, if you'll now stand, lovely ladies, our founding person, Ellen Bowen. Ellen, stand. Do what I tell you to. And the late Rose Sokolowski, and next to her, Charlene DeCesar and Karen Auld, and Fiona Myers, and a founding member, Dr. Well, I do think of you as doctor because you're so smart, Maria Wong. I remember you in 1971 entering data with your daughter on your lap over in CSU. We've been around for a long time. And of course, people might not be here, but we had Leah McDonald and Darlene Lang, Rachel Cameron, Ann Adams, Trish Fehrenbach. And have I forgotten anybody? Oh, June. June just is always in things that are happening. And we met on her project called Happen that was in the Faculty of Health Science at the time. Anyway, these persons are absolutely unequaled and tireless in their dedication to serve. You can't do research. And at one point, we had 17 trials running at the same time. And lots of people are hired for a project, and it's like playing an instrument, and they do that one thing. But no, not our ladies were conducting symphonies of projects. And they're just unequaled in their dedication and loyalty. I am so very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gina. Very thoughtful, inspirational words then. Congratulations once again. It's now a real privilege and a pleasure for me to introduce the next speaker, again, colleague and a good friend for almost my entire career here at Mcmaster, and my predecessor, Dr. John Kelton, distinguished university professor and currently executive director of the Michael G. DeGroot Initiative for Innovation in Healthcare. John has been, I believe, the most impactful dean that Canada has ever seen. He's a large part of the reason for our immense success, and it's a pleasure to introduce him to the podium. John.
Thank you, Dean O'Byrne, inductees, families, ladies and gentlemen, but especially Liz, Lauren, and Chandra. I've been part of the community of distinction induction events for a decade and a half. I'm very familiar with the traditions we've established to ensure the consistency of the ceremony. The central imperative is simple. Conclude each and every induction speech by reading the citation. Dean O'Byrne, normally it is easy for me to follow instructions. I've followed it before, and if given the opportunity, I'll follow it again. But today, we're here to honor Delsworth Harnish. Dell was a wonderful, magnificent, inspiring disruptor. He delighted in building and innovating through disruption. So how do I honor a person like Dell? I think it's my duty to ignore the tradition. Dean O'Byrne, just this once, I'm going to start, not end, with Dell's citation because that's the way Dell was. This is a citation for Delsworth Harnish, PhD. Dell Harnish had an immense capacity for disruptive and constructive innovation. A successful virologist, he became renowned as an educator and a champion of inquiry-based, student-centered pedagogy. Joining Mcmaster in 1984, he was the Bachelor of Health Science Honors Program founding assistant dean from 2000 to 2015, establishing the program's trailblazing reputation and making it the most sought-after undergraduate program in Canada. His leadership style was ambitious, idealistic, inspiring. As Vice Dean Undergraduate Health Science Education from 2015 to 2018, he was a visionary leader in launching collaborative cross-faculty programs. He received numerous Mcmaster and national awards for curriculum development and was a 3M Teaching Fellow, Canada's highest award for university teaching. As the expression goes, and now for the rest of the story, any person with accomplishments like these belongs in our community of distinction. But these facts are the qualitative Dell Harnish. They describe Dell to me, to all of us, the same way that orange describes a sunset. Dell Harnish was not a biography. He was, an experience. He was qualitative, and the essence of that quality was that he was simply irreplaceable. There are things in life we can all read about, we can hear about, but we never understand them until we experience them for ourselves. Not coincidentally, these are the most encompassing, confounding, and transforming experiences of our lives. Things like falling in love, becoming a parent, for a researcher, like many of us, discovering something new in the lab. With these experiential things, we never truly understand them until it happens. And I don't need to tell the family, I don't need to tell any of us who knew Dell was a happening. Those who knew Dell know just what I mean. Take, for example, the Bachelor of Health Science program. As I've said, he was the founding dean, built the program. Those words don't do justice to what happened. 20 years ago, Harvey Weingarten, then provost Susan Denberg, began to search for a leader for this new program. Such a role required an educator who could comply with Mcmaster's Byzantine, multiple rules, incredible regulations, someone who would provide meticulous detail, someone who could stick handle through the multitudes of pompous committees before arriving at Senate for approval. Dell Harnish? What were they thinking? Now, if there ever was an anarchist dedicated to messiness, a person born a rule breaker, a man who loved the scuffling and the high sticking in the corners around the goal, it was Dell, and this was a match made in heaven. Dell took the job, an incredible success. Dell had one of the most prodigious minds I have ever encountered. He had the most perfect memory for the most tedious, microscopic rule and regulation, as long as it supported his argument that day. Now, of course, when one of us brought to his attention there could be a completely different perspective on the same guideline, he gave his half smile and simply say, well, that's your interpretation. But the results, Bachelor of Health Sciences was Canada's finest, simply Canada's finest, most sought after program. It was Dell's attention to the success of the students, the appreciation of his colleagues, the administrative support team that made him so successful. Dell Harnish was a happening. He was a happening that cannot be replaced. Not here at Mcmaster, and absolutely not with the family, not for Liz, Lauren, Chandra. Dell Harnish is a member of our community of distinction, and his plaque will remind us of his irreplaceable legacy. Now it's my privilege to invite Liz Shai, Dell's wife, to accept the Community of Distinction Certificate in Dell's honor and share a few memories. Liz.
Well, thank you, John, for your eloquent tribute to Dell, eloquent as always. I would also like to thank Dr. Stacey Ritz for leading the nomination, and to all of those who contributed, Drs. Rangachari, Cuneo, Weingarten, and Connolly. And thank you to the committee for this great honor and for your recognition of Dell's contributions to the faculty. It is an honor that I'm sure Dell would be very proud to receive. I know that Dell, if he were here, would tell us that the success of the programs that he developed was very much due to the contributions and collaborations of others, including many of you who are here today. It is also evident, as described so beautifully by Dr. O'Byrne and Dr. Kelton, and so beautifully in the letters written for Dell's nomination, that the success of these programs was also due to Dell's innovative, disruptive, mentioned often, and visionary ideas. He loved to be provocative, someone who always believed in bending and breaking the rules, and someone who always, I was going to say stirred the pot, but dare I say, he was the consummate shit disturber, always. I know that he was also very proud of creating an environment wherever he worked, in research, administration, the BHSC program, and the Health Leadership Academy, where everyone, students, faculty, and staff, would feel that they were part of something great, where they were appreciated, encouraged, excited to be there, and where most of all, they could have fun. At our visitation for Dell and at the beautiful celebration held by the faculty in his honor, I spoke of some of the conversations that Dell and I shared over the years, and I will continue on that same theme if you don't mind. Every so often, over a bottle of wine, we would ask each other the question, if you could travel in time, where would you go? I would invariably say that I would go back in time to whatever boring period of history that I was currently obsessed with. And Dell would always say that he would travel into the future. You have to be optimistic to want to travel into the future, and Dell was definitely an optimist. And it is no wonder that he believed in the future, knowing of the great foundation that he had built, the programs and the successful educators and students that he mentored and taught over the years. I suggest that you take a look at the fall BHSC newsletter. It is wonderful to read about the students, the Queen Elizabeth Scholarship recipients, and the BHSC alumni and faculty, and their amazing careers and contributions to communities locally and globally. I would like to thank you again for inducting Dell into this distinguished community. It brings great comfort to us, Dell's daughters, Chandra and Lauren, and Chandra's fiancée, Manish, who are here tonight, and to his parents and 7 siblings, to know how much you value Dell's contributions to the faculty, and to know that he's still very much in your thoughts. It is also wonderful to think that his photograph will be here amongst those of the other distinguished members, and that in the future he will continue to gaze upon us with that lovely, wonderful, amused look on his face. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz, so much, and John. Dell's legacy and memory, of course, is absolutely embedded in our history and our future. And every person on this wall has made a huge difference to Mcmaster University, nobody more than Dell. I now have the really immense pleasure and privilege of introducing the 3rd inductee this evening, my colleague, my friend, Dr. Malcolm Sears. Dr. Sears is an icon. In the world I live in asthma research, he is absolutely iconic in what he has done and the impact he has made. I'm going to tell you first a few facts, and then I'll give you some interpretation of those facts. Malcolm graduated from medical school in Dunedin in 1965. He's, as you will hear, those of you who haven't met him yet, from New Zealand, and spent the first about 25 years of his career working as a faculty member in that very prestigious university, the oldest medical school in New Zealand, I believe, Malcolm, you've told me many times. The only at one time, the only one. And then serendipity happened, and it's quite amazing the impact of serendipity on all of our lives, but this story is particularly extraordinary in that on one, I suspect, wet, albeit summer's day in London, Malcolm was giving a lecture at a meeting where he went head to head with another colleague who's on this wall, Dr. Freddie Hargreave, about a rather important issue at the time where they strongly disagreed in their interpretation of data. Now, Malcolm, I hope, will tell the story about a French scientist and a late train, and it was because of that serendipitous event, that Malcolm decided to visit us for 1 year on sabbatical in Hamilton. And that year was an immense success. The year I got to know Malcolm and Jan and his family for the first time, and it was a wonderfully enjoyable year for all of us, and I think for Malcolm. But then Malcolm returned to Dunedin after that sabbatical year to continue his career. Well, that didn't last very long, because we had recognized that this man was extraordinary. An extraordinary scientist, wonderful clinician, thoughtful, meticulous, careful, methodical, all the things one would need in an outstanding epidemiologist, clinical scientist in the area we work in. So it fell to me to try to convince, with some other colleagues, I will confess, I didn't do this all by myself, to convince Malcolm to return to Hamilton to take up the directorship of the Firestone Institute and be professor at Mcmaster University. It wasn't an easy sell, I don't think. He may interpret this slightly differently. Jan and he were established, they had family. It was difficult to move him out of New Zealand, but that's 30 years ago. And Malcolm did come to Hamilton, to Mcmaster, and has created a career that has made him and us world famous in this area. He's done extraordinary things, but 4 areas that are particularly noteworthy. Malcolm has helped us really understand the origins of childhood asthma, from a large cohort study that he ran in Dunedin, and then more recently in a study I'll mention in a few minutes here in Hamilton. He helped us understand the risks associated with asthma treatment that was considered to be the gold standard of treatment at the time, regular use of short-acting beta agonists. His study is the study that changed the way we managed asthma using those medications. He provided immense impact into understanding why asthmatics die, and in fact often because of overuse of these medications. And he has provided tremendous insights into the treatment of asthma and the role of inflammation in managing this chronic disease. The study I want to mention, one particular study, is I think particularly important in relation to what Malcolm has done and in the legacy that he will leave here in Hamilton, and that's the child study. I mentioned it briefly in my earlier remarks when I was up here. This is a study that is a really good example of the aphorism, imagine the impossible and then do it. Because this seemed to be an impossible study to pull off. We wanted to, Malcolm and his colleagues wanted to enroll infants while still in the womb, in utero, in a large population originally thought to be necessary to have 10,000 moms and babies enrolled at that time, and then followed through the lifespan, through childhood and into early adult life and so on. Didn't quite get to 10,000, but Malcolm and his colleagues enrolled 3,500 Canadian children in the womb at the time of the first ultrasound. And these children are now aged 7 years or older and have been evaluated, and they have made immense impact in our understanding of, for example, the role of the microbiome at birth and how that impacts the risk of these children developing asthma and allergic diseases. Malcolm is a wonderful individual to work with. I will, however, warn you of one thing. Be very careful writing a paper or a grant with Malcolm. Do it once, because you will learn a lot, but don't do it twice. Malcolm is meticulous. He's one of those people where you get the very best draft you can, give it to Malcolm, and it comes back just full of comments. So you make those changes, make the comments, send it back, and it comes back full of comments. So eventually what gets sent in is perfect. And he's one of those people who gets surprised when reviewers have comments to make on any paper he submitted, because it goes in such a good shape. Malcolm, I'm delighted you're being inducted to this wonderful this wall of distinction that recognizes so many of our wonderful colleagues. And I would like now to read the citation that goes with your photograph on the plaque. Malcolm Sears was an eminent clinician researcher in his native New Zealand when he joined Mcmaster as a professor of medicine in 1990. Over the next 29 years, he made groundbreaking contributions as a researcher and clinician on asthma, with his research particularly focused on children. He was the founding director for the Canadian Healthy Infant Longitudinal Development Study, CHILD, a comprehensive birth cohort study allowing evaluation of genetic, epigenetic, host, and environmental factors and health issues including food allergies, hay fever, and asthma. His success was recognized with many awards, including the Asthma Society of Canada Lifetime Achievement Award and the 2016 J. Allen Taylor International Prize in Medicine. Congratulations, Malcolm.
What can one say? Firstly, let me say how honoured I am by being selected to join this notable wall of inductees. This came as a surprise, but one of those surprises that you said, thank you, because this was a great honour. And it's just a special honour to join several colleagues already on this wall. And I want to make a special mention of the person that Paul referred to, Freddie Hargreave. If I have time, can I tell the story of the French physician? That was the first time I'd ever met Freddie. I was presenting at a conference in the Barbican Centre in London, Freddie was the chairman for the session. I was the third speaker. And Freddie found me over the lunch break and said, I've just had this message from a French physician who's missed his train, and he won't be here to give the second talk. So what I'm asking is for the first and second speakers to extend your talk. You can have 5 minutes more so that we keep to time then after that. Which made me go back to my room and pull out, these were in the days of those blue and white slides that you had to use before PowerPoint, and found a couple of extra slides which I threw into my talk to give me more to talk about. And the topic that those slides introduced was something that Freddie Hargreave had developed here in Canada, the Methacholine challenge test. And I had found that children who'd never had asthma in their life had a positive test. And Freddie could not take this. This was wrong. This could not be. We had this on-stage discussion. He said, we'll have to sit down tonight and talk about it. So we did. We sat down that evening and talked about it. And he said, you know, you should come and work with me in Canada. The basic message was, then I can put you right and tell you how to do research properly. But that led to my coming to Mcmaster at Freddie's invitation to the Firestone and to Mcmaster for 1 year in 1986, which, as Paul has said, was when Paul and I first met. I enjoyed that year immensely. I went back to New Zealand very happy with my sabbatical. And a couple of years later, at a meeting, I think in Florida, one of those big asthma meetings, Freddie and Paul said, can we take you out for dinner? We'll just have a nice meal together. And it was partway through that I realised this was a recruitment exercise back to Mcmaster. And I said, why would I want to come back to Canada? They kept telling me why I should want to come back to Canada. And eventually, a couple of years after that, we did. So we came back in 1990. Part of the reason for coming back was just what Mcmaster and the Firestone Institute represented. It was that collaboration, collegiality, scientists, clinicians, researchers, all working together for the good of the patient. But whether you're working on smooth muscle in the airway or you're doing a drug trial in patients, the whole theme was bringing everybody together. What does the patient need, and how can we best investigate and undertake this? And so it's a particular light that Freddie is right behind me on this wall. His wife Alex was going to be here today, but health reasons precluded her. But she and Freddie have been great friends. But others that are also on this wall, I would acknowledge too. Norman Jones, who hosted me in his home during my first visit to see what Hamilton was really like, to see if this is where I should come on sabbatical. Jerry Dolovich, who was a leader in allergy. Maureen Campbell. These are all people that we've experienced their influences in the field of respirology and allergy, and which have had a major influence on my career development as well. It's that spirit of collaboration, and I echo the comments made by the two previous speakers of the teamwork that brings people together. There was a certain other university, not named, that tried to recruit me actually shortly after I came to Hamilton. I said, that's not fair. Why don't we do it all the time? This is just what we do. Somebody brings you and pays your way, and then we recruit you somewhere else. But what kept me in Hamilton was not the commute, but the collegiality and the friends that I'd already made during that year in 1986. And that's what's kept me here all this time since. It's been a wonderful place to work for the last 29 years. As well as paying tribute to my colleagues at the Firestone and here at Mcmaster Department of Medicine, I also want to pay tribute to the allergen network of centres of excellence, which I've been a part of since it was established 15 years ago, I guess it was now. Because it was through that network that we were able to get traction on this impossible dream of studying thousands of children across Canada. These children are now being seen as 8 or 9-year-olds, despite the fact the initial grant from CIHR, we said, thank you for the seed money. They said, no, that's all there is. It was the seed money. They gave us $12 million to start, and we've so far, I think Diana will tell me, we've spent $50, $60 million, and it's still going. And this is a great success story, and it's one of those legacies which I'm delighted to leave now in the hands of the next generation of researchers. People have asked me, what's kept you going a little bit beyond your official retirement date? part of that was the younger generation of researchers. We've been mentoring, training, telling them it's time for you to take it over, and finally they are, and they're running the study very well, and I see that study going on for decades. It is in good hands and it will continue. I want to pay special tribute to a lady sitting in the back row, Diana Lefebvre, who has been research manager for the study for the last decade or thereabouts, and has done an incredible amount of work of keeping this multi-centre, multi-everything study. Somebody made a comment before about an orchestra and a symphony, and the role that I've often seen myself in as the director, the founding director of the child study, is the conductor of the orchestra. You've got all these people with all their skills, and they are reading music that I have no idea what it is. I mean, give me a gene chart and I'll say, pass it on to somebody else. Epigenetics even more so, and microbiome, all these things people understand. My task is to keep everybody playing the same score as we go through all this, keeping everybody on the same page. And that's what has been exciting about the research, not only with the child study, but in previous studies that are undertaken, some of the asthma research, clinical trials. It's teamwork and collaboration that has made this all happen. I want to thank my family for being, firstly, willing to make this trek back to Canada. It was interesting, Jan and I had discussions about it since the meeting I had with Paul and Freddie, and for 6 months we didn't sort of think this was really a possibility. And then finally we said, time to have a family discussion, sit down around the dinner table. And the feedback was, well, what are you waiting for? Why wouldn't you go back to Canada? So we did, and it's been wonderful to have had their support, and it's great that both our son and daughter and their respective partners and families can be here with us today. I want to thank Jan especially, who has been my support person for many decades, many decades. When we got married, when I was still in medical school, the plan was I was going to go into family practice in New Zealand. Well, this is a far cry from that. I still have a hankering for it, but I think I've left it a bit late to do that now. But instead, we came to Canada, to Mcmaster, and that was clearly the right decision for many, many reasons. We both express our thanks to the Mcmaster community for welcoming us to Canada, welcoming us here to Mcmaster. It's been a wonderful experience, and these 29 years have been just a blessing to all of us. Thank you.